Hey everybody, it is Mary here again, and today we are going to be covering auto mode and what is auto mode on your camera. So today's video is all about figuring out auto mode. I think a lot of us kind of veer towards auto mode when we first get a DSLR, and a lot of it's because we really just don't know how to use our camera and we want to just start taking really nice photos. The advantage of having a digital DSLR is that you can actually adjust these settings manually and or select certain or isolate certain features on your camera that you can control, and then the camera can do the rest. So in auto mode, what's actually happening? Well, there's three things that are happening. In auto mode, what happens is that when your camera is looking out this way, we'll say the camera is looking out in this view. Let me redo that. My drawings are terrible. Somebody help me. Okay, here we go. So as your camera is looking out, what it does is it's taking a reading. It's taking a reading of the light. And what it does is then it adjusts three different things. It will adjust on its own the ISO, which we covered last week, the shutter speed, and the f-stop or aperture. Okay, those are the three things that it is automatically adjusting. And what it's using is it's doing what's called a light meter. So inside of your camera box, when you're looking inside, you have, your typical view of your landscape or whatever. But at the bottom of your camera, there's some numbers. And on mine, over here, it usually says 1/200th. And then there's like this little thing called a meter. And then it has left, and then it has right. Depending on if you're using Canon or Nikon, if you go left, or if it's reading left or if it's reading right, it's either overexposed or underexposed. And the whole goal is to get a perfect exposed image, meaning the proper amount of light. So your camera, and then on this side is usually the ISO. So your camera is literally out here looking at, and it changes. So if you ever put your camera in auto mode, look at these things change at the bottom of your viewfinder when you're looking through. Because as you move, if it's darker, what ends up happening is that it might automatically increase the ISO, or it might decrease the shutter speed. Because remember, shutter speed is like your eye blinking, and the slower you blink, the more light gets let in. And it might be adjusting the aperture too. So if it needs more light, the aperture might go down in numbers, and if it needs less light, the aperture might go up. So you'll see that these things are kind of all simultaneously adjusting themselves. The other thing that you'll see when you're in auto mode is that it actually puts it, typically, it puts it in a JPEG. A JPEG is just a compressed image that runs through your camera's knowledge. Of the best color / correction. And then it also, so what that means is that when you take the photo, let me just back up here. When you take the photo, it comes in here. The camera reads it. It's already metered and it's taken the photo, so it's already adjusted all your ISO, aperture, shutter speed. And then it comes in and it comes through the system of the camera, because your camera is kind of like a computer, and then it adjusts the temperature, exposure, contrast. And we're going to get into all this real soon, but it does that automatically for you. So it kind of, and then what it does is it actually makes the file smaller. So this is important to know, because once we get to it, we're going to talk about the difference between RAW and JPEG soon enough. But I just wanted to touch on that this is something that also happens in auto mode. The other thing that happens in auto mode is it automatically determines what your white balance is. And that just means the temperature of your photo. Is it yellow and hot? Or is it blue and cold? Again, we're going to talk a whole video just on white balance and what it is. But basically in auto mode, your camera is doing, look at all of this. Your camera is literally doing all of these things in auto mode. So what auto mode means is your camera is making decisions for you. Your camera then is in control. I can't, there we go. But your camera is in control. So that's what that means. Auto mode just means you're saying to your camera, look, you make the best decisions on what the lighting should be, what the aperture should be, what the shutter speed should be. You're going to also decide what it's going to automatically correct to, and you're going to compress my file, and you're going to put it in white balance, what you think is best based on the readings that you get off of here. So this is, I mean, it's good to just get started, to start getting used to where you're, you know, how to point and shoot. But it really, I mean, it really isn't very helpful for you to be able to take the images that you want to, because your camera is telling you this is what is best. And I'll just tell you that you're smarter than your camera. And that's what I want you to know, is that you are smarter. Because you're human and you can see things, and it's called freedom of expression. So next week we're going to start breaking down. Let me just see my little list here of what we're breaking down, but I know we're breaking a bunch of stuff down. So next week we're going to talk about, here's kind of the layout, shutter priority. These are different modes on your camera. Shutter priority, and I'm just giving you a basic overview because at the end of the day, you should be shooting in manual mode. Shutter priority, aperture priority, and then the week of the 14th of June, we'll be talking about manual mode. And lastly, for the last week of June, not the last week of June, the second last, we're going to be talking about white balance. And then last but not least, it's not last, actually, this is going to go through the whole summer, so you better just hang out. The last week of June and moving into July, that's when we're going to talk about the difference between RAW files versus JPEG. So this is WTE, what to expect. All right, guys, hopefully this video was helpful in you understanding what happens inside of your camera during auto mode.